Looks like something scraped off a cafeteria tray. My sister-in-law didn't just say it, she spat it loud enough for every chair around the table to flinch. Then she leaned back, smirking. Even my kids could do better. Silence slammed into the room. Her oldest daughter stiffened. The younger one blinked fast, fighting tears. My husband's jaw tightened. My mother-in-law looked like she wanted to disappear. My pulse thudded in my ears, but my voice stayed steady. I lifted my glass, letting the moment stretch until she felt certain she'd won. Then I said quietly, "I didn't cook tonight, but someone you know did." If you had walked into our lives a few years earlier, you might have thought we were one of those calm, well-balanced families you see in neighborhood brochures. A quiet street on the edge of Portland, 2 houses sitting side by side, kids running back and forth between yards, dinners shared often enough to feel comforting. From the outside, it all looked effortless. I used to believe that too. Back then, I worked in interior design, picking fabrics and layouts for people who wanted their homes to feel warm. Funny how I could do that for strangers, yet inside my own extended family, warmth was something I was constantly stitching together by hand. My husband, steady and good-hearted, tried to keep the peace. His mother, gentle but growing weaker each year, leaned on us more than she admitted. And then there was his sister demanding dramatic treating, every gathering like a stage built for her convenience. That last part was what slowly unraveled everything. When we first moved in next door to my mother-in-law, I thought it was the perfect setup, close enough to help, far enough to breathe. But the reality was that whenever my sister-in-law visited, she brought her 4 children and immediately drifted off to a screen or a couch, expecting someone else to pick up whatever parenting she dropped. And that someone was almost always me. At first I told myself it wasn't a burden. I loved children, still do. My boys adored their cousins, and I genuinely cared for the 2 younger girls. They clung to me in a way that felt like both trust and longing, the kind that makes you instinctively adjust your voice to be softer, your presence steadier. I didn't question why they needed that so much. I should have. Over time, the routine became a pattern, and the pattern became an expectation. If the kids were loud or messy, I was called. If meals needed cooking, I was asked. If their mother wanted quiet, she slipped away and left them behind, and I, wanting peace, kept saying yes. But saying yes has a cost. That dinner, the one where she insulted a dish she assumed was mine, wasn't the first time she took my kindness and twisted it. It was only the first time she did it so publicly, so proudly, with her daughters sitting right there absorbing every cruel word. I remember glancing at the younger one that night, watching her shoulders fold inward like she already knew what humiliation tasted like. That was when something shifted in me, quietly at first, like a seam coming loose. But once it started, there was no stitching it back. After that dinner, the air between our 2 houses changed. Not suddenly, more like a slow tightening, an invisible thread pulling thinner each day. My sister-in-law pretended nothing had happened. She breezed in and out of her mother's home with the same confidence as always, acting as if the world still spun obediently around her moods. But the children felt it. I felt it. Even my husband felt it. Little things became sharper. Whenever her kids ran over, chaos trailed behind them, not because they were bad, but because they were trying to get attention from someone who rarely looked up. Her 2 boys wrestled loudly in the living room while the younger girls lingered near me, hovering the way kids do when they want comfort but don't want to ask for it. Their mother would just shrug, scrolling on her phone as if parenting were a hobby she'd grown tired of. I tried to keep my distance, but distance is impossible when the kids need you. One afternoon, I found the younger girl sitting on my back steps, tracing a circle in the dust with her shoe. She didn't look up when I opened the door. She just whispered, "Do you think Mom was mad at us that night?" The question hit me so hard I forgot how to breathe for a second. Because that night, the dinner, the insult, she had no idea the dish she mocked was the one her daughters had helped prepare. They had spent almost an hour carefully rinsing vegetables, stirring broth, giggling every time they splashed water on each other. They were proud, so proud, and she crushed that pride without even looking at them. I sat beside her on the step. "I don't think she was mad at you," I said carefully. I think she wasn't thinking about how her words made you feel." The girl swallowed, blinking hard. She never does. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, just a quiet truth from a child old enough to understand she didn't come first in her mother's world. That evening, I told my husband what she said. He rubbed his hands over his face like someone trying to wipe away years of memories, where he'd defended his sister out of habit rather than reason. "It's getting worse," he muttered. "She doesn't even see what she's doing." And then the final shift came. A few days later at school pickup, the younger girl pulled away from her mother and walked straight to me. Her mother didn't notice she was arguing with someone on the phone. When the girl reached me, she held onto my sleeve and whispered, "Can we come to your house tonight? I don't want to mess anything up again." That word again landed like a weight. Humiliation from a parent is one thing, internalizing it is another. Kids shouldn't carry that kind of fear. That was the turning point, not the dinner, not the insult. Not even her mother's dismissiveness. It was that quiet plea from a child who no longer believed she could make her own mother happy. And I knew then I couldn't stay neutral anymore. The collapse didn't come with shouting. It came with an announcement dropped casually the way someone might comment on the weather. My sister-in-law walked into her mother's living room one afternoon, dropped her bag on the floor, and said, "I'm getting a divorce. I'll be moving in here next week. The study will be my room. The girls can take the guest space. We'll figure the rest out." Just like that. No discussion, no plan, no concern for anyone but herself. Her mother's mouth fell open. My husband looked like someone had slapped him. The girls froze by the doorway, clutching their backpacks. Then she turned to me because she always turned to me when she wanted labor disguised as family loyalty. "While I'm here, you'll handle the meals for everyone, okay? Your husband works, I work, Mom's tired, so you can take this on. I'll give you $100 a month. That covers it." The audacity of it was almost breathtaking. I felt something inside me go still, not angry, not shocked, just still in a way that meant the ground had shifted for good. "I have my own home to run," I said quietly. "My own children, my own job. I can't take on cooking and cleaning for your household too." She gave a dismissive laugh. "Part-time isn't a real job. You already cook for your family, just make more. It's not that hard, and I'm paying you. You should be grateful." Grateful. The word nearly made me laugh. It was so absurd, so disconnected from reality, that it broke whatever fragile thread had kept me accommodating her all these years. My husband stepped forward, then something hard in his voice I'd rarely heard aimed at his sister. "Stop talking to her like she works for you. She's done more for your kids than you have lately." That landed. I saw it on her face. But instead of reflecting, she doubled down, arms folded. "You two are unbelievable. I ask for help for once and you attack me." For once. She truly believed that. From that day on, everything spiraled. She moved into her mother's house with piles of boxes, dropping them in hallways, leaving messes everywhere. She disappeared for long stretches, claiming she had things to handle, while the girls sat quietly in the living room waiting for someone to ask about their day. She came home late, irritated, slamming doors. The boys stayed with their father, which only made her mood worse. I stopped stepping in. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Every boundary I set was met with mockery, but I held them anyway. If she wanted meals, she made them. If she wanted childcare, she arranged it. If she wanted quiet, she found it somewhere that didn't involve abandoning her responsibilities. She wasn't used to being told no, especially not by the person she assumed would always absorb her chaos. And as she grew more frustrated, the girls grew more withdrawn. That was when I began taking notes, not to weaponize, not to punish, but to understand the full pattern. A record for myself. A map of how we had arrived at this breaking point, because the truth was becoming clearer by the day. Something was coming, and when it arrived, none of us would be the same. The warning arrived on a gray morning, the kind Portland specializes in quiet heavy, carrying the kind of chill that makes you pause without knowing why. Her mother called me first. "She's coming back today," she whispered, voice trembling. She sounded defeated. Defeated wasn't a word I'd ever associated with my sister-in-law. The woman who strutted through every room like she'd been promised ownership of the air itself did not get defeated. She got louder, she got sharper, she got cruel. But defeated never, until now. By the time afternoon stretched thin, her car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out slowly, hands shoved into her coat pockets, eyes hollowed out in a way I'd never seen. The two younger girls were inside my house, helping my boys build a cardboard fort safe from whatever emotional storm was about to unfold. I watched from the doorway as she dragged herself toward her mother's front steps. I didn't go to her, not yet. She stood there for a moment as if bracing herself, then walked in without knocking. Seconds later, her mother called me again. "Can you come? Please?" I found the two of them in the living room. Her mother sat on the edge of the couch. My sister-in-law stood by the window, arms rigid at her sides like she was holding herself together through sheer force. "They're gone," she said. Her mother blinked. "Who?" "All of them." Her voice cracked. "The boys, the girls, their father has custody now. Full custody. They told the judge they didn't want to come back with me." She turned away from the window, then finally looking at us. The expression on her face wasn't anger or pride or even wounded ego. It was something closer to panic. "They said they're happier without me," she whispered. "Happier." Her mother covered her mouth with shaking hands. I simply stood there, letting the truth settle inside the room like dust on forgotten furniture. My sister-in-law kept talking, voice rising. Their father said he can provide stability, that his place is calmer, that the kids feel more secure there. He told the judge, "I've been distracted, that I'm overwhelmed." Her mother breathed in shakily. "Have you talked to them?" "They don't want to talk to me," she snapped. "They barely looked at me in court." Silence stretched. Then she spun toward me as if searching for someone to blame. "Is this what you wanted?" I didn't answer. "Not yet." She took a step forward, voice cracking with bitterness. "You're always there. Always stepping in, always acting like you know my children better than I do." Her mother tried to intervene. "Honey, that's not—" But she didn't hear anything. She only heard the echo of her own humiliation. "You must be thrilled," she hissed, "now that they prefer you. Maybe you'd like to raise them yourself." Something inside me snapped at that, not anger, not defensiveness. Something cleaner. Truth. "I never wanted to replace you," I said quietly. "I wanted them to feel loved." "They were loved," she shouted. I stepped forward, then closing the gap between us, lowering my voice in the way you do when you want someone to hear every syllable. "Loved," I repeated. "Do you remember the dinner? The one where you said the food looked like something scraped off a cafeteria tray?" Her face drained. "You mocked it," I continued. "In front of everyone. In front of your children. You didn't ask who made it. You didn't turn around. You didn't look at their faces." Her jaw twitched. "They made that dinner for you," I said softly. "Your daughters. They were so proud. And you crushed them before they could even hand you the plate." A breath hitched in her throat. Her mother pressed a hand to her chest, whispering, "Oh, sweetheart." But my sister-in-law only stared at me stunned, as if hearing the memory for the first time. They told me later, I continued, that they thought they ruined everything. They thought they embarrassed you. They thought they failed. Her eyes glistened. "Why didn't you tell me I tried? For years I tried, but you never listened. Not to me, not to them." She shook her head weakly, stumbling back a step. "I was stressed. I was juggling everything. You have no idea." "That's true," I said. "I don't know everything you were juggling, but I know what they were juggling. Fear. Uncertainty, the feeling that love had conditions they couldn't meet." Her mother began crying, then quietly tears slipping down her cheeks. My sister-in-law's anger crumbled, replaced by something smaller, something frail. "I didn't mean to hurt them," she whispered. I thought they knew." I exhaled slowly. Children don't know unless you show them. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then her mother cleared her throat, voice trembling. "Honey, there's something else we need to discuss." My sister-in-law looked at her eyes brimming. "What now?" Her mother swallowed hard. "I'm selling the house. I can't manage it anymore. And I'll be moving next door, with them." The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if gravity had shifted. My sister-in-law stared between us, her mother leaning toward me, her brother's partner standing firm, the children next door choosing peace over proximity. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was alone. Not because we pushed her out, but because she had walked away long before anyone noticed. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I've lost everything," she whispered. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or resentment, just a quiet, aching sort of clarity. You haven't lost everything I said, but you have consequences. You can start over. You can become the person they want to come back to. Her mother nodded slowly. They're still your children. But you have to be their mother, I added gently. Not their critic, not their burden, not their absence. She didn't argue. She didn't deflect. She didn't lash out. She just cried, raw, unguarded, stripped of the persona she'd built to hide behind. For once, she was simply human. Outside, I could hear my boys and her daughters laughing, cardboard swords clashing in the yard. Life was still happening, still waiting, still willing to move forward, but only for the people willing to choose better. My sister-in-law finally lifted her face, eyes swollen but clearer. Do you think they'll ever forgive me? I hesitated, then told her the only truth worth offering. They might, I said quietly, if you give them something real to come back to. In the weeks that followed, the house next door felt different, quieter, calmer, as if the walls themselves were finally allowed to breathe. Her mother settled into the small extension we'd prepared months earlier, grateful for the closeness and relieved to no longer manage a home that swallowed her energy. She spent her afternoons reading with my boys or teaching the younger girls how to sew simple stitches. The laughter drifting through the open window sounded like healing. The girls adjusted to living with their father far more easily than any of us expected. When they visited, they walked in with lighter steps, shoulders no longer curled inward. They helped me cook without looking over their shoulders for criticism. They talked about school projects, new friends, and the quiet comfort of evenings where no one raised their voice in frustration. It was the kind of change you don't notice all at once, just in small, steady glimpses of who they were becoming. My husband and I found ourselves exhaling in ways we hadn't realized we'd been holding in. Our home wasn't bigger, but it felt bigger, more open, more peaceful. Even her mother in her softest moments whispered, "Thank you for giving us a place to land." As for my sister-in-law, she kept her distance. A few short messages sent to her mother. No demands, no chaos. No attempts to drag anyone into her storm. I didn't know whether that meant she was rebuilding or simply retreating. But for the first time, the uncertainty didn't scare me. When I look back now, I realize the breaking point wasn't the insult or the silence that followed, or even the custody ruling. It was that quiet fear in a child's voice asking if love had limits. No family should make a child wonder that. If you've ever had to protect someone from the people who were supposed to love them most, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments and subscribe if you want more true family dramas that remind us what real love should look like. I was fighting for air when my sister leaned in, yanked the oxygen tube from my face, and whispered loud enough for the entire room, "Stop faking it. You just want pity." No hesitation, no remorse. My parents stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded, eyes flat, saying nothing as my lungs collapsed in on themselves. But the mistake they all made was assuming I was alone. They didn't see Dr. Cole standing behind them, watching everything. And 2 weeks later, at Grandpa's will reading, he would speak 6 words that ended their entire story. Before I continue, where are you listening from? Tell me, so I know someone out there understands what it feels like to face family alone. My name is Evelyn Hart, and for most of my life, I played the role everyone expected of me, the strong one, the steady one, the daughter who never needed anything. People think that kind of strength is admirable. They don't realize it's usually just loneliness dressed up to look respectable. Growing up, my family didn't dislike me. They just didn't see me. Not really. Not the way they saw Marissa. She arrived 4 years after me like some glittering miracle, the child my mother had always dreamed of. Beautiful, delicate, dramatic in a way that drew attention like a magnet. I remember being 8 years old, setting the dinner table while Mom bent down in a cloud of perfume and told Marissa she had a special spark. I spent years trying to understand why I never had one. The truth is, I learned early that silence kept the peace. When Marissa cried, I stepped aside. When she wanted something, my parents rearranged their lives. When I needed help, the answer was always the same. "You're strong, Evelyn. You'll figure it out." And I did because I had no other choice. The only person who ever interrupted that narrative was my grandfather, Arthur Hale. He was the kind of man who noticed the smallest things: a fraying sweater cuff, a long exhale the way a child held herself when she was trying not to cry. When I was 12, my family forgot my birthday because Marissa had a recital downtown. I sat behind his old tool shed, staring at the dirt, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. He found me, there knelt down with those rough hands, and said quietly, "You are a gem, hidden in darkness. One day the light will find you." I didn't understand what he meant then, but I held on to his words like a lifeline. As I got older, work became my refuge. I built a career in healthcare operations, learned discipline out of necessity, my lungs demanded it, and kept my distance from the chaos of my family. I lived in a small condo in Denver, surrounded by quiet and clean air purifiers, telling myself space was enough. Then Grandpa died, and somehow no one thought to tell me he'd been declining. They gave me the news after he was already gone, as if my grief would be tidier that way. I should have known that was the beginning of everything unraveling. The day of Grandpa's funeral felt like stepping into a play where everyone else had memorized their lines, except me. The church in Denver smelled faintly of polished wood and lilies, and every pew was filled with relatives, dabbing at their eyes as if grief were a performance they'd rehearsed. I stood near the back, hands clasped, lungs tight from the altitude, and the emotion I wasn't allowed to show. Marissa, of course, sat in the very front, draped in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her shoulders shook dramatically, earning pats and sympathetic whispers from every aunt within reach. My mother leaned over and announced proudly, "Marissa was such a comfort to your grandfather in his final days." She said it loudly enough for half the row to hear. What she didn't say, what they all refused to say, was that no one had told me he was fading until it was already too late. When the service ended, people filed out into the parking lot holding paper cups of weak coffee and talking about Grandpa's generosity. I slipped toward the coat room, needing a moment to breathe. Instead, I got Marissa. She cornered me between two racks of black wool, her face dry despite the theatrics she'd just displayed. "You should prepare yourself," she said, her voice low, almost gleeful. "Grandpa left most things to me. The house, the investments, all of it." She smiled like she was sharing good news. Some of us were actually there for him. The words hit harder than I expected. I had no claim on Grandpa's money, I never wanted any. But the cruelty of her implication still sliced deep. I didn't respond. Silence had always been my armor, even when it shouldn't have been. By the time I got home that night, my chest felt tight. I chalked it up to stress, cold weather exhaustion. But at 2 a.m, I woke gasping for breath, lungs refusing to expand, the familiar terror of my condition closing in like a fist. I called an ambulance, and everything blurred into flashing lights and the rhythmic clatter of wheels down a hospital hallway. When my parents arrived the next morning, I expected worry. What I got was irritation. "Evelyn," my mother sighed, arms folded, "you always find a way to complicate things. We have the will reading this week. Your father has paperwork." Marissa leaned against the wall, examining her manicure. "She's probably exaggerating. She always wants attention." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words never reached them. They had already turned away, and that was the moment something inside me shifted. When they left the room, it felt as if the air went with them. The hum of the ventilator was steady, reassuring, and then without warning, it wasn't. Marissa stepped closer to my bed, her smile thin and sharp, the kind she wore when she thought no one was watching. "You really don't know when to quit," she murmured. Then she reached down, fingers closing around the tubing beneath my nose. Before I could react, she yanked. White-hot panic exploded through my chest. My vision fractured. I clawed at the empty air, trying to pull oxygen into lungs that refused to open. The world narrowed to the sound of my own desperate choking and the chilling calm on Marissa's face. "Stop faking it," she said softly, almost bored. "You just want pity." I tried to speak, to scream, to do anything, but my body wasn't listening. I saw the doorframe blur, and for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. A dark figure stood there still as stone. Dr. Adrian Cole. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Step away from her." Marissa jolted, startled, but Dr. Cole was already moving. He reattached the oxygen, adjusted the flow, checked my vitals with precise, controlled hands. When my lungs finally loosened and the world came back into focus, he turned not to me, but to her. "What you did was dangerous," he said, quiet but freezing. And I saw all of it. Marissa stammered something about a loose tube, but he didn't respond. He simply pointed toward the hallway. She fled. Later that afternoon, after my breathing stabilized, Nurse Elena Ruiz stepped in for her shift. She checked my monitors, then closed the door behind her with a decisive click. "I heard what happened," she said, "and there's something else you should know." She told me about the night my grandfather died, the night Marissa insisted on being alone with him, how the monitors went wild 30 minutes later, how she sat by the window strangely calm, how the breathing tube had been found slightly displaced. "I'm not saying I know what happened," Elena said, "but I know what I saw." A cold resolve settled over me, sharper than fear. Then Dr. Cole returned. He pulled a chair to my bedside, exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. "Your grandfather trusted me," he said. "He asked me to look out for you if you ever ended up here. And before he died, he left instructions, documents you're meant to receive." The pieces were shifting, aligning. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. And the truth, every buried, suffocating part of it, was finally rising to the surface. The morning of the will reading arrived colder than it should have been. Denver's sky had that sharp metallic gray that always comes before snow, and as I walked toward the law office downtown, every breath burned through my lungs like winter glass. But it wasn't fear making me tense. It was clarity, a kind I had never felt before. I wasn't walking in alone. Dr. Cole met me at the entrance, coat buttoned, expression unreadable but steady. Nurse Elena Ruiz joined us a moment later, her presence small but solid, anchored by the kind of quiet conviction that can't be shaken once it decides to stand. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded, though ready wasn't the word. I wasn't prepared for this. No one could be, but I was done being silent. Inside the waiting room buzzed with low whispers. My parents sat together, stiff-backed, attempting dignity. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. My father's knee bounced beneath the table, a tell he'd had since I was little. And then there was Marissa. She wore a white sweater dress, impossibly soft-looking, the kind of fabric that telegraphed innocence and expense. Her hair was curled perfectly, her makeup clean and dewy, an angelic veneer that would have fooled anyone who hadn't watched her rip the oxygen from her sister's face. When she saw me enter with Dr. Cole and Elena walking at my sides, something flickered in her expression. A tiny involuntary twitch. Not fear, yet more like confusion mixed with irritation. As if I'd broken some unspoken rule by refusing to show up alone and apologetic. The door opened again, and Attorney Gregory Miles called us into the conference room. It was a glass-walled space overlooking downtown, the kind of place where silence carries weight. A polished wood table stretched across the room, and folders sat neatly arranged in front of each chair. We took our seats. My parents avoided my eyes. Marissa made a show of smoothing her skirt. Gregory cleared his throat. "Your grandfather, Arthur Hale, left very precise instructions," he began. "This reading is to be conducted with all immediate family present, as well as witnesses he named specifically." His gaze flicked to Dr. Cole and Elena. Marissa stiffened. "We'll begin with the estate distribution." Paper rustled. Gregory lifted the first document. "The primary residence in Boulder, appraised at approximately $800,000, will be divided equally between Lorraine Hart, William Hart, and Evelyn Hart." My mother blinked. My father's head jerked up. Marissa shot to her feet. "That's not right," she snapped. "Grandpa told me the house was mine. He said I would be taken care of." Gregory didn't flinch. "Sit down, Miss Hart. There is more." She sank back into her chair, knuckles white against the table's edge. "The remaining investment accounts," he continued, "are to be allocated based on separate instructions provided by Mr. Hale." He closed the folder. "Before we proceed, we need testimony." The room shifted. Air thickened. Dr. Adrian Cole Gregory said Mr. Hale named you as a crucial witness. Dr. Cole stood slowly, his posture straight, voice level and clear. I cared for Arthur Hale for 5 years. In that time, he confided in me significant concerns about his family dynamics, particularly regarding Evelyn, who he believed had been neglected and mistreated. He looked straight at my parents as he spoke. Mr. Hale requested that if Evelyn ever arrived at this hospital, I was to ensure she was not alone. My mother opened her mouth to object, but he continued. 3 days ago, I walked into her ICU room and witnessed her sister Marissa Hart deliberately removing her oxygen tube, causing airway compromise and acute respiratory distress. The words hung in the air like a dropped chandelier. My mother gasped. My father's knee stopped bouncing. Marissa's lips parted in shock. "That's a lie," she burst out. "She was exaggerating. She always exaggerates." Elena rose before Gregory could call her. "I was there," she said quietly. "I saw you pull the tube, and I saw you stand there while your sister choked." Marissa let out a strangled sound, a mixture of disbelief and panic. "This is insane. They're making things up. Why would I hurt my own sister? This is some attack." Gregory lifted a hand for silence. Then he reached for a separate envelope. "Your grandfather anticipated denial. He left this as well." He handed the envelope to Dr. Cole, who stepped closer to Marissa. His shadow fell across her as he set a hand on her trembling shoulder. The room froze. He looked her directly in the eyes and spoke the 6 words Grandpa had left for her. "I saw you." And he knew. The effect was instant. Marissa's face drained of color, eyes blown wide with something raw fear, recognition, guilt, maybe all 3. Her breath hitched. Her composure cracked like thin ice. What does that mean?" she whispered. Gregory answered. "It means your grandfather changed his will after learning about your financial misconduct and your treatment of your sister. He left documented correspondence notes and accounts of the distress you caused him. He instructed me to remove you from inheriting any major assets." He opened the last envelope. Furthermore, Mr. Hale created a separate bequest to Evelyn. My heart hammered. I didn't want money. I'd never wanted anything from them except respect. But hearing my name spoken with intention, spoken by someone who had seen me, made something inside me steadier. Gregory read to my granddaughter, Evelyn, who lived her life in shadows not of her making. I leave the mountain retreat in Boulder and a healthcare trust ensuring she never worries about treatment. I saw your strength. I saw your kindness, and I was always proud. My throat tightened, not from grief this time, but from recognition. Someone had finally chosen me. Across the table, Marissa broke. She shoved her chair back and dropped to her knees beside me, grabbing my hands. Her voice trembled with desperation. "Evelyn, please, please, don't let them do this. I didn't mean it. I was stressed. I was scared. You know how things get. We're sisters, blood is blood. You can't just abandon me." I pulled my hands back gently. All my life, I had been the one who bent, the one who absorbed the hit, the one who stayed quiet so the family stayed peaceful. But peace built on someone's silence isn't peace. It's bondage. "Marissa," I said softly, "I'm not suing you. I'm not pressing charges. I'm not taking this to court." Relief burst across her face. But then I finished. "But from today forward, you are not my family." Her smile collapsed. You don't mean that. I do. I'm done carrying the weight of your choices. I'm done pretending your cruelty is just insecurity. You will deal with your debts. You will deal with your reputation, and you will deal with the truth of what you did." My mother finally found her voice. "Evelyn," she whispered, "this is all so much. We didn't know." "You did," I said quietly. "Every time she mocked me and you laughed. Every time you praised her for breathing and ignored my achievements. Every time I asked for help and you said I was strong enough. You knew." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. My father's eyes glistened. "Can you ever forgive us?" "I don't know," I said. "But forgiveness without change is just another performance. If you want a relationship with me, you will have to earn it." No one spoke after that. Not a word. When we left the law office, snow had finally begun to fall, soft, slow flakes that melted the moment they touched the ground. Dr. Cole walked beside me, Elena just behind. For the first time in my life, the air felt clean. I moved into the mountain retreat 3 weeks after the will reading. The house sat on a quiet hillside in Boulder, tucked between tall pines that swayed like they were breathing with me. The first morning I woke there, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors, and for the first time in years, my lungs expanded without effort. No alarms, no tension, just air. I unpacked slowly, room by room. Grandpa's books went into the study exactly as he'd kept them, alphabetized, annotated, some pages softened by time. Running my fingers across his handwriting felt like touching a memory that had finally learned to speak. I didn't block my parents' numbers. I didn't invite them either. Boundaries, I learned, weren't walls, they were doors I controlled. A week later, my father sent a message saying they were working on things. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it. On Saturdays, I met Dr. Cole at a small cafe overlooking the ridge. He told me stories Grandpa had shared during appointments, questions about my work, pride he never voiced to the family, worries he buried because no one listened. Each story stitched something inside me back together. One evening, Nurse Elena called. A journalist from a national women's magazine wanted to talk. She'd heard about my experience at the hospital, not for scandal, but for a story on resilience and invisible daughters. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I said yes. Healing, I realized, wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about stepping into a life where I no longer needed permission to breathe. In the quiet of that mountain house, I finally understood what Grandpa meant when he said the light would find me. It wasn't about fortune or revenge. It was about finally seeing my own worth after a lifetime of being overlooked. And if you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, I want you to hear this clearly. You deserved better too. If my story resonates, share where you're listening from. Tell me your truth in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. You're not alone.